All right, Joy Adler, how are you doing today?
Couldn't be better. I'm so thrilled that you met my friend, Ed Thrall from Florida.
Yeah, it's so great to meet people in these different walks of life, but we have this common thread of let's do this together and helping others. Right, we all got a reason for being here and doing our thing, and Ed is very much a spokesperson for that. He's got this great book, Modern Mystic, a Handbook for Multidimensional Living. He bridges what he learned with you as a colleague of yours at Barbara Brennan, but he has done a lot with remote viewing, and if you are familiar with the Monroe Institute and any of the folks down there, he brings that in as well. And he shares some of that with us in this conversation.
I've known Ed for like 25 years now. He's a great musician. But he's really known the world over for training people with remote viewing. It's a true specialty. And, the thing that Ed does is, and he talks about that, he loves to empower people to normalize this so we can open those sixth senses. He literally lays it out for us on how to do that. We are just thrilled to have you meet Ed Thrall on Energy Diagnostics Podcast. Well, we are so excited, Dan, aren't we?
We are. We're at it again.
We're at it again with our next guest. He is a renowned healer and really an intuition expert. And he has written a memoir that is off the chart fabulous. It's gotten great reviews. It is called Modern Mystic, a Handbook for Multidimensional Living. We want to welcome you, Ed Thrall from Florida, joining us on Energy Diagnostics Podcast. Dan, you wanted to have our listeners and readers learn a little bit more about his memoir.
Yeah. So we have a nice little bit Ed sent to us here. As you mentioned, Modern Mystic, a Handbook for Multidimensional Living, captivating memoir and spiritual exploration that combines deeply personal experiences with profound insights into the mystical and paranormal. The author, Ed, shares a transformative journey through a challenging childhood, extraordinary spiritual awakenings, and a quest for higher consciousness. And then if I can just brag a little bit with a review here, part autobiographical, part educational, this book is an easy read as it flows through the author's varied experiences, giving one insight on different areas you might want to explore further. Ed, great to have you on.
and listen, this is a good point for our readers that are part of book clubs. This is your book. This is the one you want to be reading and discussing because it really has phenomenal tales from your life, Ed.
The first thing you'll notice, the cover is going to draw you in right away. Ed, that cover is amazing. How did that come about?
I had taken a picture of an owl that was like 10 feet away from me when I opened my garage door. And it was just this owl, had to be a foot tall, was in these palm trees 10 feet away from the front of my garage door. It was just a green screen, basically, of palm trees with that owl there. I wanted to use that as the cover, and Stephanie said, well, I had a little difficulties with that. We're using a photograph. So she came up with something that conveyed the same ambiance. And then in the book, on a lot of different pages in the book, she put a symbol of an owl. I have this thing with birds. I remember I used to, as a child, I travel out of my body spontaneously constantly. And on a few occasions, I found myself up in the sky in my astral body flying along with birds. And so I guess that's the connection, because now when I go into my front yard to go to the mailbox, there's mockingbirds that fly down and meet me at the mailbox. It's almost like they're curious about why I keep going to that box and getting stuff out. And then as soon as I come back in the house, they fly back to whatever they were doing. But it's like I got this relationship with birds. And so that wasn't too surprising that that owl just sat there and never flew away. It just sat there looking at me.
Just magnetized. Of course, they're like, hey, listen, when is he going to pull a Scooby snack out of that
mailbox?
That's a possibility there, yeah. So why would somebody be so interested in what's in this little box every day? So.
You know, you reveal eye-opening personal anecdotes about spiritual awakening, techniques for achieving expanded awareness through discipline, and add a blend of mystical experiences and grounded wisdom to inspire other spiritual journeys. And now I've known you for about a quarter of a century. It's the time I met you as a musician. Yes, our Ed has an amazing musical background. You're so multi-talented. You're a businessman, a leader, and also really a renowned intuitive. You've trained a lot of people with remote viewing. We would love if you could share with our listeners and viewers a tale of something you experienced that you would want them to know and get to know you a little bit through that experience.
Well, I'll kind of set the background up a little bit too. I had a lifetime of out-of-body experiences. And then what was a game changer for me, I think in my 40s, I read Robert Monroe's books, all three of his books. And it's like, well, this is like going home. This guy knows everything I've been experiencing all my life about out-of-body experiences. So I read his books. Then I went to the Monroe Institute. And it was interesting is that when I called there, and the woman that answered the phone said, well, hardly anybody's here today because they're all at Robert Monroe's funeral. He had died, I think, on St. Patrick's Day. It was in March. So everybody was at his funeral, and they said, well, we'll get somebody to call you back. And so that was the beginning there. And the reason I mentioned that is because Robert Monroe came and visited me on my way home during my first experience. From the Monroe Institute, I did about 10 of their programs there after I'd been listening to their HemiSync tapes, because I had a hard time learning how to meditate. Meditating with HemiSync, which synchronizes right-left hemisphere of the brain, is really a gateway for some people that are having a difficult time meditating. So from the Monroe Institute, I learned about breath work. I learned about remote viewing. Looking back on it now, I think I had a Kundalini awakening, because I have the symptoms of that as well. For about a year and a half during that time, I would see events happen almost every day. I would see something happen before it happened. Sometimes it would be 5 or 10 minutes before it happened. It was like little wrinkles in time. Sometimes it was the day before. One of the ones that was significant was I was in the gym in the morning and on a Stairmaster and reading the paper, and all of a sudden I had like a TV screen open up, and I saw an accident where a guy in a pickup truck ran into the back of a dump truck that was parked on the side of the road, and he was killed instantly. And I'm thinking, well, maybe this is symbolic of something I need to watch out for, even though I don't drive a pickup truck. So the next day, almost exactly 24 hours from that, I actually saw the accident. And the only thing I can think of is that when somebody dies in a violent, tragic way like that, it sends out a shock wave. And if you're an empath, you pick that up. The reason I decided to do the remote viewing is because I was at one of the Monroe Institute programs, and a famous remote viewer was there, a guy named Joe McMonagle, who incidentally is originally from Miami. Luckily, over the years, I got to speak with him a few times. But one of the things he did was he came into our program and gave us about an hour and a half talk about remote viewing, and he gave us the target to remote view. The target was covered up. He was on a pedestal, but it was covered up so we couldn't see it. It turned out to be the Devil's Tower, and I nailed the target. I drew a picture exactly as it is. And I'm going, well, I got a knack for this. So I contacted one of my friends that lives in Washington State, and I said, I just had this experience at the Monroe Institute, and I want you to do something, because my mind was, okay, if you can do this, then you can get the numbers for the lottery. So I want you to write down some numbers in an envelope. Put that envelope on top of your refrigerator, and I'm going to come and remote view those numbers and see if I can develop a skill in perceiving numbers ahead of time. I did my cool down. I listened to some HemiSync, calmed myself, got into that meditative state. I went to his house, and it was like I was there walking around. I could see the envelope there, but I kept getting sucked to his dining room table. There was a letter there on the table, and I couldn't read the letter, but I could see very distinctly that it had the seal of the state of Washington on the letter. And no matter how hard I focused on looking at the envelope and the numbers in the envelope, I kept getting sucked back to that letter. And so finally, after about 20 minutes, I gave up. Then I called him later that day, and I said, well, I did the exercise, but I didn't have any luck seeing the numbers. But I said, what in the world is that letter on your dining room table with the seal of the state of Washington on it. And he said, you could see that? And I said, yeah, I couldn't see anything else. I kept getting sucked over to that. So he told me at that time his son was living with him. His son was like in his early 20s, and he got a serious traffic violation where he had lost his license. His license had been suspended or revoked. And they had been arguing about that letter for days. The emotional attachment to that letter, I kept getting, because I knew them both. Yeah. I got sucked over to that. So that was a big lesson for me about remote viewing. I thought, wow, there's some protocols and exercises you need to do in order to stay on a target. That's when I decided to train in remote viewing. So I asked, at that time, Skip Atwater was formerly the head of remote viewing and Stargate program for Army intelligence. But he was the researcher and he ran the lab at the Monroe Institute. So he had that background. And I asked him, I said, well, who would you recommend a teacher in remote viewing? Because they just declassified it. And he recommended two people, either Lynn Buchanan or a guy named, I think it was Phil Smith. Lynn's in New Mexico and the other, Paul Smith. And Paul is in Texas. So I chose Lynn and had an amazing experience learning remote viewing. And what led to the other things that I've learned about, high sense perception, as we call it in Barbara Brennan School, is that your subconscious mind has access to all the information in the universe. That's the belief of the remote viewers. And so the whole protocol for remote viewing is to do something on paper that occupies your conscious mind. Subconscious mind brings all the information from the universe in. So I started using that in teaching. So I said, well, if that's the case, how do we build a relationship with our subconscious mind? Everything that we learned in the Barbara Brennan School about learning to love and accept yourself fits right in with this protocol. If you embrace all those fragmented parts of yourself for whatever reason that you've detached and compartmentalized, you need to bring it all together and learn to love and adore yourself, because there's no handbook in navigating this physical world. And that's what I'm working on now. Actually, what's amazing, I could write a whole book on all the feedback I'm getting from people that read the book, because the stories, they triggered their memory and reading the book. Like, well, a good example would be, I have a cousin who lives in Texas, and his sister-in-law died of brain cancer, I think about 10 years ago. And he told me the story that last week she was alive, she was in hospice. And she just sat up in bed one day. They thought she was going to die any minute. She sits up in bed. She's got this big smile on her face. I met Jesus and the angels around him. And she says, they're funny as hell. They've got this wicked sense of humor. And I've been telling people, and I even mentioned that in the book, that my experience with my guardian angel spirit guides, that they got a wicked sense of humor. They deliver a message to you that'll just make you laugh. Like about 3 or 4 months ago, I was on my way to New York to do a workshop with some Barbara Brennan graduates and students, trying to build this relationship with their subconscious minds. And I wear hearing aids, and my hearing's been bad most of my life, and it's gotten worse. So I had to get these new hearing aids that are real big and clunky, and it's very obvious they're having 2 corks in your ears. So, and my wife and I have a practice of every day trying to have gratitude. But that was kind of set by the side because I'm grumbling and moaning all day about having these hearing aids. I stop at a hotel for the night, and the last thought that night was putting the hearing aids in the charger and thinking, oh, God, I wish there was an alternative to this. I get up the next morning. I go down to have breakfast in this hotel while I'm on the road. Everybody in the dining room is deaf, and they're all using sign language. And it's like, okay, I get it. Yep. Be grateful, thankful.
You're a great teacher, Ed, and you've taught for so many years now, right? And love to hear that you're doing workshops and things. And you really normalize intuition, that we can develop it, that this is our normal state. And it comes from an extraordinary experience of wanting to escape childhood experiences. And it becomes this amazing gift that you utilize and you support others in utilizing as well. We want to hear about what you would like your legacy to be. Of course, we've got this memoir. Sounds like there might be a follow-up tome as well.
I guess my legacy is just doing what I can to really convince people that we all have the capacity to do this, and you have the skills. So I'm going to give you some ideas here. Find out which ones work for you and go with it. Because the people I trained in that workshop, all very confident because of these skills they have at Barbara Brennan and what I taught them. They're going out and doing their own workshops now, and it's amazing. And I have a WhatsApp group. I think there's about 68 people on there now, and about every other month I do another lesson. I think the curriculum that I'm developing now might be the next book. And I had a great talk with Rebecca Ellens, who's somebody that I have a high degree of respect and admiration for. She was one of my teachers, and she has amazing high sense perception. She gave me some ideas about what I could do for a second book.
That's kind of what you talk about here in this book, right? You're obviously sharing your stories, your background, how you got to where you are, and your story along the way of developing this spontaneous out of body and then finding Bob Monroe's book. But then you also, it sounds like then you're adding in educational pieces for folks as well, sort of like a how-to guide. Is that right?
Yeah. And my perception on that is that breaking down HSP or high sense perception, I think that we get guidance or information from several different sources. And the one I mentioned before, the subconscious mind has access to this sea of energy that's information all around us. That's one, if you just tap into that field. The other one, of course, is your guardian angels or spirit guides. And then the other one is your soul group. And I had an insight on the soul groups. You know, every year, when I was a second year teacher, we would go in and greet the year one students. That was always a lot of fun. One year I walked in there and I see a little symbol above every student's head. Some of the symbols were a little cross, and I said, okay, this must be a Christian soul group. And then I saw a Star David over a bunch more of them. I saw this is a Jewish soul group. And then I saw the other thing that was baffling to me was a pyramid over the heads of the remaining people in the group. So it was maybe about 30 students and about 10 each having the symbol of this little pyramid. And got the feeling this is an ancient soul group. This might go back to ancient Egypt or Atlantis or Lemuria. So it's like, so not only do you have your higher self and your soul, there's a whole group of souls working for you in this incarnation, because this is a tough school.
Well, that is really great information. And I want to thank you for bringing up Rebecca Ellens, another wonderful healer, educator, one of the deans of the Barbara Brennan School of Healing. She wrote a phenomenal review, if I may share that with everyone. Ed generously shares a multitude of personal paranormal experiences, which is in this book. He also gives countless references for ways in which anyone can train to grow their conscious awareness of the different dimensions of their being. This, as he explains, facilitates one's own awareness of the innate psychic high sense perception ability that everyone has. His experiences are so inspiring and interesting. They take us beyond the common perspectives of who we are into much deeper, more expansive terrains of consciousness. I love this book, Rebecca says. Can't wait for the next one. And it's from our Rebecca Ellens. Wow, that kind of summarizes it. My friends, if you want to learn how to open to your intuition, to be able to use in all aspects of your life that is always available to us, right? You want to pick this book up because it really reads as a how-to. That is one of Ed's prowess as a master teacher. And we want to thank you so much for joining us today on Energy Diagnostics Podcast. And if there's anything that you would like to leave our viewers and listeners with before you go, of course, we've got to pick up this book.
You got it. Head over to Amazon, right, Ed? Pick it up, Modern Mystic.
Amazon is where it's at. Modern Mystic, a handbook for a multidimensional living. Ed, any parting words for our folks?
Well, the one thing I would say, I had a conversation recently with an actor, Robert Monroe, and he had some doubts about whether he had guardian angels or spirit guides. And I says, I guarantee you're never alone. And they're there to assist you. establish that relationship with your guardian angels, your spirit guides. They're there to serve you and help you get through this. And you got to do the work. You got to do the heavy lifting, but they're there to give you insights and help and guidance and protection.
It's inspiring. And you know why? Because it is tough in Earth School, right? Obviously, we're here because we can do it, but gosh, I can just imagine that's really comforting for a lot of people to know and also to remember that we are not alone and that we need only ask for signs, maybe, right? For the presence of our guides and guardian angels. That's really a beautiful message. So thank you for continuing to lead and train and support others. And you've left this beautiful book in our hands, all that information. It's like a treasure trove to delve into. Can't wait to read more. Thank you so much for joining us, my friend. Such a pleasure.
Thank you.
Ed.
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. Joy and I really appreciate it. Hey, if you're liking our content here, please make sure you like, follow, subscribe on your favorite platform to make sure you, stay up to date with all the latest and greatest we put out here at Energy Diagnostics Podcast.
That's right, Dan. And if you're liking our content, folks, please feel free to share so others may enjoy the benefit of the wisdom our guests are offering.
Thanks so much, and be kind to each other out there.